Welcome to Paper Cuts and Plot Twists, where the paper is dangerous and the plots are twisted.
Paper cuts, what's the risk? Just another day in the life, just another plot twist. But is it a tragedy, a comedy, romantasy? Just another fantasy. It's paper cuts and plot twists. The rest we'll wait and see.
Welcome back to Paper Cuts and Plot Twists. This is already episode 9. We are doing Battle Ready, which is actually a topic I am not as well versed in, though I see it in stories and I think we need to talk about it. So, we've talked about different elements of storytelling and why we love these elements in our stories, why they help make really great stories. It's what draws us in as readers, it's what we try to amplify as writers. It's part, in the creative process, we're thinking about different ways that we can use these elements in our story. But it's also like why I love the stories I love is comes down to the basis of a lot of the things we've already talked about in the previous episodes. But as far as writing this one, this isn't one that I'm as versed in writing, but I see its importance. And the example of this is going to be we use battle ready. Now, battle ready could mean a lot of different things. I mean, action, in one sense, we're saying action, and that's the generalized version of it. But the other side of it, we're saying is battle ready. So it means like fight, tension. So, as far as action, when we say lights, camera, action, we do mean that at that moment, the characters, the actors, are going to now proceed to tell the story through action, through movement and what they're doing. And that could be, that action scene could be two cars driving through the streets. And maybe it's not a direct conflict of fists together fighting, but maybe they're like trying to run into each other or whatever. So that's action. When you tell a story, it's funny, my nephews, I remember just like and most guys, when they tell a story, it's so funny, is the way they tell it would be different than like my nieces and the way they tell their story. So my nieces might tell about somebody, the conversations, the relationship, the nature of those relationships. She said this, they did this. But when boys talk about it, or my nephews in particular, thinking about them, they would tell me about the action and the like, he hit him and oh, it's so great. And they're like pummeling each other. And I'm like, wow. And the words that they would use, like pummel and like he hit him and he slapped him across the face. And they're telling me a movie that they just watched. And that's another thing is that in film, action translates very well. So there are a lot of like we talk mysteries. You can talk about like mysteries, thrillers. There are genres that really, even like fantasy, like sword play and things like that, there are genres that really lend to the very active action sequences where it would be conflict and battle. But you describe it very differently in words than you would in film because film, you actually get to see what's happening. And there's so much more that you're seeing, like martial arts. You can describe the martial art move, but like with jujitsu or karate or any one of those, it's kind of a dance. It's choreographed in a very specific way. And I'll come back to the choreography of action sequence in film because I think that's an important topic. But the reason we like these, and this is where I think it comes down to, is first of all, a story is characters, it's the setting, it's the dialogue, but essentially the story is moved forward through action. So this happened, it caused this, and then this happened. Sometimes, like with characters, there's tension. And another thing that you have in a battle is tension. So in a story, tension is the thing that the character wants something, but the reason the story is interesting to you is they're trying to get the thing and they may or may not get it. And there's always something that kind of comes along that kind of prevents them from getting the thing. And so the conclusion of the story is did they get that thing or they didn't? And that'll tell you if it's comedy or a tragedy. For instance, again, Hamlet. Hamlet it becomes a tragedy because there's a battle scene at the end. They're fighting. And now here's words that an author may use in a battle scene like Hamlet. You could say thrust and parry. I don't even know if he said that in Hamlet, but if I say thrust and parry, I'd kind of be a reader that would need to know what those words mean. And unless I've done sword fighting, I may not know what that means. Now, if I had done sword fighting and you were writing a story for me, I may not need to say those things because you kind of already, it's assumed. Like I may use other words because it assumes that you think I have a basis of knowledge, or the instances you don't have any knowledge. Now, if you see that on film, of course, you kind of understand what that is because you see the motion. And I do think that today, when we read something, we have a lot more context because we've have a lot more visual cues due to film. And when we see something acted, so now for a lot of historical literature, you have the play. So action scenes would have played out right on the stage, which again, going back to Hamlet, that's what we see. But I also think that it informs our writing so we can add in action sequence to our stories more readily because we can see them in film and in theater. And so you can pair a little bit of the knowledge of action and writing together. But it all plays on this point that tension is really important. Tension is the thing that drives the story in certain ways. It's the tension between the thing that the main character wants and that he can't get, and that back and forth until you get it. Now, because tension is a part of storytelling, what we have with the battle ready action writing of two people fighting is we have the maximum profit, the maximum payoff of what tension is. It's where if it were a battle of this kingdom A versus kingdom B, kingdom A wants this thing. Kingdom B doesn't want them to have that thing. So they fight. And they fight to prevent kingdom A from getting it. They don't want it, but they don't want kingdom A to have it. Or the other tension point is kingdom A wants thing and Kingdom B also wants thing, and then they fight to see who's going to get it. And for Kingdom B, they get it, comedy. For Kingdom A, they don't get it, tragedy. So depending on the perspective of the story you just told, if it's Kingdom A and you're telling it from their perspective, it's a tragedy. So you read their version of like, we really wanted this and Kingdom B prevented us from getting it and we're really sad. Or they're not even around anymore because they lost the battle and maybe no one really survived unless you're Paris and you run away and you tell everybody about the battle in the Iliad. So you're maximizing the reason action works is you're maximizing that tension in a story, which is so compelling. So that's why thrillers and things like that, and even horror, they play on that. Like horror plays on the catharsis of fear, but you use action and you use implements of those kind of battle tensions. Like somebody comes in with a gun or something and they fight or whatever that might be, whatever that looks like. So I do think like as I think about it, I try to learn like it's not I mean it isn't something that I'm comfortable with like writing it, but I should be because it's a really not to say that everybody's fighting and I think that again like my niece, sometimes we're using more of our words like they said this, they said that. It's more it's emotionally driven. But what's interesting is like what we're saying with battle ready is it's not about the words. It's like I still feel the same way, but instead of using words, I'm using my fists. So how do I write that? Okay. So here's this example. In Bridget Jones' Diary, there's a scene and it's Darcy and Daniel Cleaver. That's right. I was trying to remember Mark Darcy and Daniel Cleaver. And Daniel Cleaver and Mark Darcy have hated each other for a really long time. And they start competing for Bridget's affections. And this is pretty late into the movie. And they get into a street fight. I actually really think the street fight is hilarious. They're kicking at each other. I don't know if they pull each other's hair. I think somebody gets hit in the face with a trash can lid. They bust through a window and the window breaks. And they fall into a in the scene, if you haven't seen it, there's like the scene where there's like somebody's singing happy birthday and they're bringing out a cake. Somebody falls into the cake. I don't even know which one. And so there's a lot of things happening. They're fighting with each other, but it's also creating all of these other problems. Like somebody's trying to have a nice birthday and you destroyed the cake, or this poor innocent restaurant has this beautifully glass window with their name on it and they bust that. And then there's the trash can lid, poor trash can, right? So there's a lot of implements in the fight that were like innocent victims to the aftermath and casualty of the fight. Okay, the interesting part about this though, so writing it, you write it in one way and imagine it to fit the story in a particular way. They're fighting over Bridget's affections. They're British guys, professional guys. One's a lawyer, one's a in book publishing. Okay, to give that's important context because they're British, they're professionals, they're fighting for this girl's affection, and you just imagine, that is the age-old battle right there, is fighting for a woman's affection. The Odyssey. I mean, the Iliad, Helen of Troy, Penelope in the Odyssey, who has all these suitors, and the move of the archery that you see, and to win her affection. Because the strong men are trying to earn the affection of the lady they're pursuing. That is a perfect battle ready scene. So if you're writing rom-coms, that's something that can go into the story. So it's not even a thriller, right? But that's a maximizing the tension that you can use in a story that's thrilling and interesting. It maximizes your action and your plot point, like moving the story forward, and it keeps your reader engaged because it's also an emotional maximization, because these two people, rather than using dialogue to yell at each other, they're using their fists. I mean, you could say it's vulgar, but hey, it keeps people reading, it keeps people interested in the story. So, about going back to Hugh Grant and his character Daniel Cleaver, he was noted in an interview saying that they tried to choreograph this scene, and they pushed back and said, but we're two British blokes fighting and we wouldn't fight like this, like professionally. So, in other words, you bring in a professional choreographer and he's imagining the scene like you're going to throw a fist this way and you move this way, and it, looks really cool being filmed, but it's not real to the characters because they don't. So, the point is, they don't know how to fight. So, this is talent. I was talking about this today, actually, about the talent of knowing how to do the best thing and do it poorly because that's what the character needs. So here, I could plan a really great fighting scene. Two skilled marksmen, two skilled swordsmen, and they fight with each other. But what if they didn't? What if they're not good? What if that's the whole point? So again, when you're thinking about a story, it works because it works contextually. It works within the story, and those are kind of the stories you love and that you find to be interesting. Is not just that there's action in it and that they're perfect. There's got to be a fail point. And I think that's also what makes like the battle ready, is you don't actually know who's going to win. You don't even know like if they can find a way out. Lord of the Rings at the very end with the mouth, which is this character that comes out for Sauron, and he's like the voice of Sauron. And I don't think at the time the ring had been destroyed yet, or it was being destroyed, or they think there's no it's like in the process, like Frodo and Sam are like at the brink. They're there and it's like right at the very end everything's going to be destroyed. But then they have won, like the orcs, everything went and they had fought them and they had kind of won that battle. But the final battle, and they know that the destruction of the ring is the paramount thing, but they're going to make a final stand, and they take it instead of waiting for Sauron to come to them. They're going to take it to his gates, and that's where they meet the mouth. And they're not, they're like overrun. There's more orcs by Mount Doom and by Sauron that like it seems impossible. Of course, and in the movie, you see like, okay, the destruction of the ring is the thing. That's the thing that changes everything. That's the thing that finally destroys Sauron's power. But they're ready for that battle. They're ready to fight knowing that there's a possibility they're not making it out of this. And that's kind of important too, is like you don't necessarily know if they have enough of the good fighters on their side or if they're going to be run by orcs. And some of the tension is holding back is that you don't know who's going to win. You don't know who has the most skill. And maybe they are well matched in skill, maybe they're not at all. What's also interesting about Lord of the Rings is in the book, and because we don't really see this in the movie, Sam, Frodo, Merry, Pip, they all go back, and Saruman and Wormtongue have kind of overtaken the village and taken their home and already had worked their evil in the area, and they have to fight to take it back. So that's also compelling, like that you have all of these battles that they fought. They were at the very beginning of the story, they were not prepared for any of it. They didn't know what they were going to get into. They didn't even have weapons. That was the other thing, is they do get them as the story progresses, but they don't leave Hobbiton with anything really worthy of battle. So they get that on the way of their quest. And they don't really have the skill either. They're not fighters. I mean, Sam's a farmer. As far as I know, I think Frodo is a writer. I mean, I guess, he's a gentleman, of course. Yeah, so he's a writer. Their skills are just not matched for the world outside of them, but they have to fight. They find a way to be ready, and they don't always succeed, or successes cost them a lot. And the example there is, I hit the microphone if you're wondering, sorry what that was me. Frodo gets pricked in the shoulder and it becomes cold, and his life is on the brink, and it isn't until he gets to Elrond that they can help him. But you don't know if he's going to survive. And he tries to use the magic of the ring, but it's not successful because it actually causes more danger. So there's a lot of that too, where it's like you try something and maybe it doesn't work out. The point is that there's this physicality to these scenes and these moments where you need more than words. You're maximizing action points, and it should fit to the story. That's the other thing, is we don't want to just see action, action, action. It gets kind of tiring. And even for a movie, like, you get a little tired if it's just constant action, because there's a moment in the mind where you want to process what has happened. You want to deal with the aftermath of the action. So when Frodo is injured, they have to deal with the aftermath of what are they going to do if he doesn't make it. And this is before they decide to take the ring to Mount Doom, but it's still this idea of like, you don't know what's going to happen, and you keep reading to find out. So you had that action moment, and it was a high peak moment, but you almost need the relief of time and process. And then, of course, in a story, what's great is it just amps up and amps up and amps up until you get to the final battle, until you get to the final moment where the ring finally is unmade. And it's necessary to give yourself room within that back and forth, these plot points. And I think action should be used in stories that make it matter, make it count. But think about, for the writer, make your characters do more than walking, more than talking. What's in their hands? What skills do they have? What skills don't they have? What conflicts and confrontations, what battles come to their door that they have to like meet? Like, if somebody's hitting you, are you going to respond? Are you going to try to react to that? If somebody pushes you, like, are you going to just take it? There's only so much, like, it's okay if that's the character, but also think that's not always the character. Some characters don't do that. Some characters respond in kind, or, defend themselves at least, or stop the fight. It could be anything like that. But action, in the most purest sense of the word, that active moment of a battle is like the epitome of that. And it helps, I think, for the writer to understand that using it, and I will say sparingly, again, like, it doesn't have to be like all the time, especially if your genre doesn't. But example, you're writing a rom-com, there still can be action in it. And maybe there should be. It depends on the story, but like thinking through that. For instance, I recently read by Catherine Senner. I've mentioned her before because I actually really like her rom-coms. I like the way she tells stories, and it seems for me, strangely, that every time I read one of her books, there's like something that I really directly relate to, and it'll be something that maybe I just experienced in that moment. I don't know. I don't know how she's writing her stories or like why, but it seems like I'll read a story and they're never in order. It's not because it just got released or something and I'm reading the newest one. Sometimes I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, I'd be interested in reading that type of story. Anyways, it's Catherine Senner's Things We Save in a Fire. And it is very active. As a matter of fact, the main character is a firewoman and she like trains and she's learning parkour and she's learning all these different things to kind of compete with the guys in her firehouse. I guess that's what you want to call it. And there's also a scene in the story where there's a fire and they have to describe like what's happening in the fire and like her reaction and action within it. So it's not a battle, although there's an emotional battle and there's a verbal battle, but there's also a lot of action in that story. And it's well done for the sense that I really felt like I was there. I felt like she did a lot of research to understand what it might take to be a person in that scenario. The character, like I said, it's a rom-com, but the character was more than just this cookie cutter thing. It was a very visceral and active story, and there was physicality to this. That's a good word. Okay. I'll say it that way. There's physicality. So in a battle, in a fight, you sense the physicality in the story because it's fist to fist, right? It's you're coming up against something and it's tangible, it's real, it's not words. And I think that I believe it has that physicality to it that characters, because we do, we move through the world. We're not just sitting in one place. Hopefully not. It's not healthy to do that. We're doing something. Going to a concert last night and dancing because I like the songs and I know the songs. There's physicality to it. I mean, I wasn't in a fight. As a matter of fact, people were pleasant and nice and met a lot of really cool people. But the thing is like we move. And I think the benefit to understanding how and why we love action in stories, why we love the battles and what my nephews maybe are teaching me is those are interesting things. And between the intellect, the mind of a character, there's also the physical reality of the character. And there's a thing that the character wants and the tension between will they get it or not get the thing that they want, which is the story. That's like what they're driving to. And you can have a villain, but what is the villain doing to help prevent them from getting it? That's kind of the setting of a battle, even if it isn't directly physical. There is a physicalness to it. So it's really interesting to think through that and think about that because we do like stories that have a little bit more than just verbal sparring. While interesting, the stories we love have a lot more to them. In Pride and Prejudice, there's a lot of dancing. And if in one case you could say that the dancing was a battle between Darcy and Elizabeth, well, yeah, there was some tension there. So that's I guess that's kind of an interesting aspect of there's some physicalness and dancing has often been connected to battle or the movements. And when you look at those movies where there is sparring and karate or something like yeah, it does look like a dance sometimes. So from the rom-com to the thriller to the mystery to reading about history and the old battles in World War II and World War One. And as a matter of fact, I really enjoy reading stories from World War One. A lot has been written in about World War II, and World War II is a precursor, or not precursor. I'm sorry, wrong word. It's the result of World War One, and or they're tied in that way. But World War One kind of leads to World War II, and I've always kind of wanted to understand why or what was it about World War One. And a really great subset of literature that came out of World War I from people who were writing after and trying to deal with the emotional response of that period of time, that historical period of time. And some of it is very heartbreaking, the aftermath of these battles, the aftermath of these fights. And Tolkien and Lewis themselves were dealing with it. You start with Chronicles of Narnia, and it's in World War II. And it was a reflection point for Lewis because he'd gone through World War I, and Tolkien also was writing about Lord of the Rings. So their understanding of battle and fighting and armies and fighting good versus evil was very raw and real, and it informed a lot in their story. So I think that's also an aspect of context and why we put that in there into stories, and it becomes part of it. It's not directly related, but it influences how maybe they talked about it or they dealt with it. It helps us process. And sometimes I'll say this last thing: the battle belongs to the Lord. It does. But the battle also is this moment where sometimes we feel we're up against things we can't fight. It's like an invisible something. And maybe my nephews, they don't have anything in their life that was so drastic, but maybe they encountered bullies and they can't stand up to their bullies. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's true, but let's say it was. And maybe this is also why video games, the fighting video games, maybe that's why it's appealing. There is something to be said for every one of us that when we feel like our hands are tied and we can't stand up for ourselves, there is a catharsis to seeing good overcome evil, like where you perceive this person has the right idea and maybe they're experiencing something that you're experiencing, even if it's what you're experiencing is theirs is more metaphorical. I don't know. But there's something about seeing someone overcome their situation and being able to overcome their enemy. And that is also a good reason of why we would like those stories, why we like stories where we see that somebody's overcoming physicalness. And I believe I brought this back. I may have mentioned this, I think in episode 1, talking about vampires, is I had a neighbor who had MS and they relied on a lot of to move through life, and they were at that point on the way to being probably more permanently in a wheelchair, but were not yet. And they liked reading about vampires because of the ability for the vampire to have no limitations physically. That freedom to have strength and the ability to basically overcome any physical disability. And that was compelling for my neighbor and why she loved the Twilight series. I think there's a lot to that. Nonetheless, Fight Club, which was part of a cultural phenomena in a lot of ways. And, there's some psychology there of him fighting himself or whatever that is. You can look into that if you choose. But in that was the question of getting oneself to feel the numbness and overcoming that numbness. And I think that Fight Club was on the premise of that, but I think also the other side of it is we do feel. And there's something to be said for the physicalness to help us deal with the emotional. And words aren't going to cut it. And it's why some people like to just go work out because they had a rough day at work and they want to work out, and it increases one's endorphins. That physicalness is needed. It's important to what they're doing and helping their mind work through things. Makes them tired. It makes them feel like they could do something more than just sit in front of a computer or whatever their situation is. We like those stories. We like to see and have the catharsis of the good versus evil, and the bad guy doesn't win. And they fight, and maybe even the underdog story. We like to see the underdog who didn't know how to throw a punch. He gets a good one in and knocks down his assailant, David and Goliath. We like these stories. We like to know that good can overcome evil. And that goes back to Moral Dilemma. We also rely on action in stories, and our characters are more than just walking through the story. And I think that's why being battle ready for that fight If you're a writer, think about how you're using in your stories, even if it's a rom-com. And for us readers out there who love a good story, yeah, those actions and stories and action in movies. They help us, and I think that's why they're popular. I believe that's why they're popular. I know that's why they're popular. It's why people go and pay movies. It's not just people talking. It's more than people talking. So there may be a critique of like action movies aren't really the ones that are going to get the Oscars, but definitely as an audience, we love them and we keep coming back for them. And historically, they're all over the place. Action is in all the way back. The Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid. I mean, Shakespeare, you name it. There's always a battle ready. So I guess it's time to get battle ready yourself. And with that, thanks for listening to Paper Cuts and Plot Twists. It's just me today. Yeah, and I wanted to deal with this topic because it's one that I hadn't thought of as closely as I thought about it today for this episode. I can't believe, honestly, we are only one episode till we finish the season, and I got some great things to share with you about that. So until then, have a great night, have a great day, morning, whenever it is. Thank you for listening to me, and this is Paper Cuts and Plot Twists.